Okay, we are going to try this again. Hopefully you all are with me out there. Holler if you're with me out there. So I was starting to say that there's this difference between going there and going off. And given that we are coming into this moment that is so close to the holidays, and I know many of us are going home, and often going home is a time where we're going to see old friends or where we're going to spend time with extended family. And as we all know how it goes, we don't all share the same views or the same perspectives or the same opinions, right? And so I wanted to invite us into this practice of telling it like it is with love. In a lot of the conversations I have with people, particularly when we get into the nit-grit of what it means to lead and love in these times, and what it means to want to make a difference in the world, and what it means to stand in your power and engage, I often get these questions about relationship and about how we continue to have our voice in relationship while still being love, while still being light, while still being compassion. And so today my hope is to give us some tips and some tools for how we begin to practice, and to give you this opportunity, because we are so close to the holidays, to actually start to road test some of what you get in our conversation today. Before I go there, I just want to say that, we've had a lot of conversations and dynamics kick up in this past week because of, again, sort of all of the ways that we're seeing people source permission to go particular places, whether we, sort of look at Michelle Obama's really powerful moment after the conversation about Trump and sexual harassment came out, or whether we look at the more recent sort of rantings of my brother Kanye, who I hope is doing and feeling better today. I know he's had a very rough week. Or whether you look at the very powerful moment and poignant moment with the vice president-elect in the cast of Hamilton, right? Wherever, again, people are sourcing it, we are going there. There's a way that people are feeling compelled to want to bring their voice to the forefront, and people are feeling compelled to want to express the truth, particularly in a way maybe even that they have not done so before. But what I want to say about this time, as much as all of us have been watching the different social media streams and the different kinds of feeds and seeing the different ways that people are engaging, in some ways very constructively, in other ways maybe not so constructively, the fundamental thing that I believe we're in the moment of is a real question of how it is that we want to treat each other as citizens, as fellow occupants of the planet, right? As fellow stewards of this time and this moment. And regardless of what quote-unquote regime is taking place and the ways in which we feel often our culture twist and turn in response to our leadership, I think we, as citizens, have the opportunity to ask ourselves, how do we want to hold up the example or hold up the integrity of who we say we are and what it is that we say we believe in the context of how we treat people, and specifically how we treat people when we don't agree. And so in this conversation that we're going to have today, again, I'm hoping that I'm going to give you some tools and some things to practice as you're stepping into these conversations, right? It's very easy to feel right. It's very easy, especially when the issues are things that we all feel deeply, passionately about, and we feel that people are encroaching or violating on our values. Very easy to feel right? But the first thing I want to say to you all is the practice I want to invite us into is, how do we lead with curiosity as opposed to righteousness? How do we lead with question as opposed to accusation? How do we lead with exploration as opposed to assumption? And when you're in a context, whether it's in a family context or environment, or you're in a context with friends, or you're even in a context with colleagues, and things are being said in the conversation that maybe you don't agree with, or things are being sort of proposed that you're not aligned with, how do you find your feet? How do you find your voice and what are the ways in which you may want to come into the conversation while being able to honor and respect the discourse, while also being able to potentially offer a different view or a different perspective, right? So the first thing I'm going to say is you're listening. One of the rules of the road, particularly when you're leading with curiosity, is that you're listening. You're listening, right? And you always want to enter into the conversation listening. The second practice is to check your commitment. You know, what is it that's having you lean in? Is it because you want to attack something that somebody is saying? Or is it because you feel like there's something really valuable that you have to offer to the conversation? And I name this because there are times when we want to engage, and then there are times when we actually want to be still, and we do want to hold space for what's occurring. And sometimes even in our silence and our powerful holding, more becomes possible in a conversation than maybe would have been possible if we had jumped in and sort of brought full voice at the very top of the conversation. I know you all know this when I say it. There are times when you're in a conversation and maybe what you're offering is your really powerful, respectful silence, and then all of a sudden the conversation will stop and people will turn to you and they'll want to know what you think. They're interested in soliciting what it is that you think because you have held such powerful space, or you've held such sacred space for the discourse. And so there are lots of ways that we participate in conversations, and I want to remind us that sometimes our silence can be even more powerful than what it is that we have to say. Noticing when it's appropriate to speak and when it's appropriate to be still are really, really important things to pay attention to. So again, you start with sourcing your commitment, you then listen in, you give the conversation an opportunity to evolve, you ask questions. Particularly, again, if you're finding that there are statements that are being made that you don't agree with, you have the opportunity to ask questions. Lead with curiosity, ask questions, and then based upon what you're hearing in response to those questions, you then may say, I'd love the opportunity to offer a different perspective. Can I offer a different perspective? Can I give you something to consider? So again, you're engaging in the conversation in a way that's respectful. You're also slowing it down when you're asking questions, because sometimes when people are ranting and raving, they're going very, very fast. So you asking questions also creates that opportunity for them to slow down, also potentially creates an opportunity for them to become more thoughtful in what it is that they're saying and what it is that they're expressing. And so when you're at the space where you're ready to offer, you really want to state your commitment first and foremost. Like, okay, so I've heard everything that you've had to say. Here's my commitment. It's just to maybe offer something different, a different perspective, or maybe just to share with you what I'm seeing, because what I'm seeing is a little bit different than maybe what it is that you're seeing. And then you humbly offer. You offer with no attachment. So what do I mean when I say that? Sometimes when we get into a conversation, we become very attached and committed to convincing or converting the other person to our perspective or to our point of view. I actually want to encourage you to let that go. I want to encourage you to practice sharing with no attachment to whether or not the person agrees with you, whether or not the person is going to see it your way, whether or not the person completely shifts their position or their perspective, but really offering another voice into the conversation, another shade, another color, another texture, and particularly offering another way of modeling how to be in a very robust discourse in a way that can still bring honor and dignity and respect to the people that you're engaging with, even when you do not agree with them, right? So when you offer your perspective, then you go silent and you listen again. And you're willing to listen again. Even again, if you don't agree, or even if maybe someone says it a little bit different than what you said it, because they're trying to paraphrase what you said, but they're so emotional, right? Your breath, your calm, your centeredness, your grounding actually demonstrates far more leadership even than your words. I remember giving a keynote talk in Rio de Janeiro last year. Shout out to Escola Su Vida and the Lifestyle Academy community. And I remember being backstage in a conversation with one of the other presenters, and he said to me, you know, what you said was so powerful, but I want you to know that your silence was even more powerful. The way that you listened to the community, to the group, to the audience was something that I've never quite seen before. The way that you listen. And so I'm naming it for you because even after you offer your perspective, you want to go silent again. You want to listen. And you want to trust that whether or not that person moves, what you're practicing is the ability to be in discourse in a way where you're honoring and respecting yourself and you're honoring and respecting the other person that you're in conversation with. Again, at a fundamental level, I believe what we are practicing and what we are learning is how to treat each other. I hear a lot of assumptions being made about who Trump folks are, a lot of assumptions being made about what is racist or not racist, a lot, you know, and you all know what I mean when you're looking at, or if you're paying attention to any of what's happening in the media, or you're paying attention to any of the discourse that are happening through the various channels. There's a lot of back and forth about what that is. And I think at a fundamental level, even when people may be saying something that you don't agree with, or people may be ostracizing or creating or making assumptions about who voted for who and what that means about who they are as people, you have an opportunity to take a breath and pause and again question, interrogate, and explore. You would be surprised at what you might find out and the way that that might even shift your approach in the conversation, right? So giving full voice, being willing to go there. I know some of you may be inspired to go off, but I'm encouraging you to actually choose the former, which is go there versus go off. Going off is about your ego. Going off is about being right. Going off is about dumping as opposed to engaging and connecting. Where going there is really being able to invite a conversation that could be different. You know, Susan Scott in her incredible book, Fierce Conversations, talks about the reason why often we are afraid to lean into more difficult conversations, or we're afraid to lean into more robust and powerful conversations, is that we will be known, we will be seen, and we will be changed. And I want to encourage you to have the courage to be willing to allow the conversations that you're going to be engaging in, particularly over this holiday season, with family and with friends and with colleagues and in the other circles that you're in. I want to encourage you and invite you to allow yourself to be courageous enough to be seen, courageous enough to be known, but most importantly, courageous enough to be changed or transformed by the conversation. Okay, I'm going to pause and just see if there are any questions. You know, if there's anything that I've said that you want to sort of revisit that is helpful for you as you're going into these conversations, or even as you're thinking about what you want to give voice to in the context of your own social media. Because I'm getting a lot of questions from people about, like, okay, so how do I want to respond on Twitter, or how do I want to respond on Facebook to certain posts that maybe I agree with or I don't agree with? And how do I think about that in the context of what I want to be modeling as a leader in this movement, right, of love, in this movement of light, in this movement of liberation for all people? What does that mean? Questions? Just checking. Okay, so you all have your practices, you've got your tools, you've got your opportunity to now go to work. You know, again, your own grounding, your own connection to your own source, your own calm. What you're modeling is more important than what you're saying. I really want to keep sort of underscoring that. Your curiosity, your willingness to lean in and ask questions, your willingness to seek to understand versus condemn, really, really important during this time. So I want to invite you all also to post, if you have questions, maybe you're a little bit on the shy side, but you have questions, to post them, or also comments, like as you come out of the weekend or as you're engaging in this practice, as you're moving into conversations with friends or colleagues, right? In the different areas or facets of your life and your community, I want to know how this practice is serving you. I want to know what you're discovering about yourself in these conversations, what you're discovering about other people. The last thing I'll share was there were some very interesting statistics that have been moving around as it relates to this most recent election, and I think it bodes examining for all of us. It bodes examining for all of us. You know, this question of 53% of women voted for Trump, and what does that mean, right? As a question, and being curious about that, right? Or the fact that most of the districts that voted for Trump, i.e. the 2,600 plus districts that wound up going to Trump in the election, are actually poor folks, working folks, everyday, hardworking, poor folks in various parts of America. What does that mean for us? So again, you know, when we sort of go to the assumptions about what power looks like, or we go to the assumptions about what people are all about based upon choices or decisions that they've made, we want to remember how it feels to have that happen to us. We want to remember that this is an opportunity to model something different. You know, it's easy to model when it's going well. It's difficult, more difficult to model when it's going harder, right? And so how do you model when it's hard to model? How do you set the example when it's a little bit harder to set the example? And what is it that we can learn about where people are right now as it relates to their thoughts or their feelings or their concerns about their future? And where are those opportunities to lean in and explore and create environments for deeper understanding, deeper connection, deeper appreciation? And how do we do it again in a way that really promotes honor and dignity for everybody involved, right? Again, we want to be curious. We want to be inviting versus right? Derek, I love your comment. You're learning to be a match to reignite the flames. Yeah, that have been extinguished by pain. Absolutely. Now more than ever, we want to be reaching across whatever perceived difference, whatever perceived disconnect, whatever perceived dysfunction that we think is operating. The strongest antidote for all of what we're seeing that disturbs us and frightens us and angers us and concerns us is to build a bridge, is to reach across that perceived difference, and is to be in communication in a way that is loving, that is honoring, that is engaging, that is uplifting. So this is the practice that I'm inviting you all into. This is your girl Rha. I love you. I appreciate you. Have a phenomenal day of giving thanks. Please send your prayers and your thoughts and your best wishes to all of the people who are working to set new examples on the front lines of all the ways that they're engaging. And if you're listening and looking for what are the ways that you can be engaged, I really want to encourage you to get out into your community this Thanksgiving and engage with people that you never would have engaged with, and support people maybe that you never would have supported, even if it's about having dinner with someone maybe that you never would have had dinner, or feeding someone that you never would have considered feeding. Build a bridge, cross a divide, connect, be authentically you, bring love, lead with curiosity, connect, build, be love, send love, model the commitment to our collective humanity. All right, you guys, I love you. More soon. This is your girl Rha. Have a great, great, great holiday. Peace.